Hello, all you folks out there in YouTube land. Unless you've been completely out of the GamerGate loop for the last few days, you all have seen that some lovely person working on the Independent Game Developers Association website has put up a harassment resource, so that you can tell whether or not that crushing blow to your ego you're staring at on Twitter is harassment or not. Not a bad idea on the whole, as they did state that a bruise on your ego's backside isn't actually harassment, but they took it a step further. They included a link to a Blockbot that blocks Twitter feeds from a small handful of individuals, and everyone that's following more than 2 of those individuals. No vetting of behavior, no checking the number of tweets, nothing. As a result, the block list that comes out of it is more than 15,000 members, all labeled harassers by no more than guilt by association. Last I checked, that sort of shit was illegal. And if the IGDA is using the resultant list, then it amounts to a blacklist. Never mind that the president of IGDA Puerto Rico is on that list, or that the whitelist includes a well-known troll and harasser. The base list includes people like Milo Yiannopoulos and Margareth, both of which have taken abused in recent days. Milo had his account temporarily suspended, and Margareth was swatted. Mike Serovic, a Los Angeles-based lawyer and GamerGate proponent, was also swatted a few weeks ago, appears on that list. Adam Baldwin does not appear, but that's because the author of the bot, Randy Harper, aka FreeBSD Girl, decided that he and Christina Hoff Sommers were useless as they ground the Twitter API to a halt with all the followers. This is unacceptable on any level. Due process is something to be observed no matter what you're dealing with, as is freedom of speech. The effect of such a list is to completely shut down debate of any kind, polite or not. That silence you hear, that's censorship, and it cannot be allowed to persist. You ladies want to be taken seriously, over there at IGDA, or any feminist, for that matter. Then grow up and get a pair of fucking ovaries, you morons. We're not 12 years old and having issues with our bras chafing because we just had to wear the cute lacy one that wasn't lined. Get out your big girl panties, and learn to think critically. Okay, maybe I'm asking a bit much of your communications and women's studies degrees, or the master's degrees you don't deserve in social and political thought, but really, would it kill you to use half a fucking brain cell and realize that not everyone is out to ruin your fucking lives? I'm a bitch on the internet that disagrees with you. I cannot, by definition, hurt any of you more than lecture on how fucking stupid you're being. If you had even the ghost of that half brain cell working, then you'd know that this place is nothing more than zeros and ones propagating in human readable form. You are certainly free to ignore me as individuals, but there are people that might want or need to hear the message being transmitted, and you crayon-chewing imbeciles are doing everything in your power to make that not happen. You specifically endorsed this Blockbot as marking the most egregious harassers, and then when the inevitable Twitter storm began, you changed the description a bit so you'd be less liable. Nice try, but not nearly good enough. Because, you see, I have screenshots from before and after the change. There are hundreds or thousands of others that have others, showing the process going forward. You cannot hide from it, as the downside of the internet and the free flow of ideas is that it never forgets. Feminism delights in using this property when it assists them in building ad hominem attacks, constructing straw, fishing for red herring, or cherry-picking to support their position. However, when used against them, apoplexy is instantaneous, the vitriol thick and pungent. The social justice warriors are trying to exclude gamers as a group and an identity from video games, and learn it rather quickly that their initial assault was an exceedingly poor idea. They've made several since, and each is rebuffed in turn. The mainstream media tried to get on the act, and when the truth started to appear despite the social justice filters, they scuttled back into their corner to watch. The sleeper awakened, found its voice, and then used it to push back at the demonization being thrown at it, the demons lurking in the very holes that had sustained it through its long slumber. They've tried to silence us, badger us, shame us and vilify us. They try to modify our games so as to not offend the sensibilities of step-forward students, and punish us for liking to take out our natural aggressions on a collection of pixels rather than real human beings. They are a handful, waging a culture war they themselves declared against a group so large and so utterly diverse that we can easily reject their arguments of non-inclusivity, bigotry, and hatred against any group of people. No matter how thin you try and split hairs, they want to be victims, be that of the state, the white man, the pizza guy down the hall. They want to include everyone that agrees with them, and the rest of us be fucked. In response from a massive public backlash and the threat of lawsuits, IGDA removed the link to the Blockbot, but not before the list had grown to over 15,000 names. They endorsed it, they had a hand in creating it, and the person that made it, one Randy Harper, is a nasty piece of work. Someone brought a bit of her code to my attention, and I went and looked myself. I'm sorry you feel that way, Randy, but perhaps you should remember that to be inclusive, you need to accept that people have different viewpoints than you do. Because no one is defined by any single characteristic. We are unique, individually and in the groups we choose to associate with. So many people have identified with GamerGate that it's going to be nearly impossible to sort out our demographics. Even if we could, I don't really think we should. You see us as a faceless mass of Caucasian testosterone, and I can tell you that that's a long way from the truth. For every straight white male sheet lord between the ages of 17 and 34, there is at least one woman, Asian, black, gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender person in the same age range. Add in the people of all varieties above that age, and the number increases dramatically. Men buy the vast majority of games, however, and so they are going to be catered to a degree. If you want to see that change, then buy video games that support the sorts of storylines and characters you want to see. The free market in action. If you make it, they will come. If they come in enough numbers, more get made. If Gone Home had sold anywhere near as many units as, say, Final Fantasy XIII, or Hotline Miami, or Depoya, then we'd see Gone Home clones 4 miles around. If it had sold as well as Grand Theft Auto 5, then they'd be worshipping the ground it walked on. Mirror's Edge, Bayonetta, Remember Me, and Alien Isolation all had strong female characters, and sold very well. The last sold well despite the publisher's egregious meltdown of a game in that franchise earlier this year. There are hundreds of games sold over the last 40 years that have featured female protagonists, female villains, and major female characters. Very few have not had women in them in some way, shape, or fashion. Most of those have no characters to speak of, let alone a protagonist. Of the balance, some don't particularly lend themselves to it, like your average warsim first-person shooter. Others don't have because the developer didn't put them in the design, and those are few and far between. Still others are franchise pieces for things that have few or no active female characters. Should we change those games to make them inclusive, or just makes games based on self-felt? As gamers, we have been accepting, even accommodating to a degree. However, there comes a time in which we must all stand and fight. If you think we wanted to fight after you declared us dead, or after Anita stepped in, or after Twitter gave women, action and media the moderation keys on Twitter, you were sadly mistaken. You've doxed people, called them slime, made them out to be worse than the vilest villains ever to walk the earth. We are not those people, and the greatest majority of people don't have the capacity to be so. You're a collection of rich, entitled, mostly Caucasian brats that need to wake up and smell the Cheetos and Mountain Dew. But I digress. This isn't about us, it's about your behavior, IGDA specifically, your decision to engage the services of Randy Harper to write you a blacklist bot. There are rumors running around about her prior history in the IT world, including ISS and Yahoo, and her firing from both organizations for varying crimes. I'm not going to comment on the veracity of said rumors, but I do acknowledge their existence. Should the least of these prove accurate, then this is a woman you want as far away from you as possible. Then there are things I can confirm, starting with the variables in the code snippet, and her own remarks on Twitter and elsewhere concerning her Blockbot and her overall attitude towards those that don't agree with her. It's entirely inexcusable. 5 women on the executive panel, and not one of you saw the problems with this. Do you not read the code that you paid for? Well, isn't that hard to parse, people? Words like sheep, idiot, monster, and stalker, while descriptive, only show the amount of vitriol at play here. You see, Randy, we do pay attention to the little things as well as the big things. You and your friends are trying to obfuscate the situation and shut down dissent. It's said that the truth will set you free, except that the truth of the situation would destroy the core of your narrative, just like the pay equality gap myth. Men and women make different choices over their lifetimes, and so if I don't make as much as my brother because I stopped working for 5 or 10 years, I would have no one to blame but myself. We're in the same field, doing the same work, and I make a bit more than he does, because I've been working that job a year longer than he has. The difference is fairly small, about 3%, but that's because the job warrants a 3 to 4% pay raise year over year. If I walked away to have a pile of little ones, and didn't come back until they were all out of high school, then yes, I would make less. People expect a man to take a job, any job, and work it until he can't anymore for whatever reason, more often than you want to think about. But reason is the death of the individual. Cry me a river. By now, you're thinking I'm a rotten bitch, a gender traitor, and a captive of my internalized misogyny. If so, good. You can think that all week, and I not only don't care, I don't have to. Because next we're going to go over something you should have thought twice about, attacking the people you did. I have a handy image here, for reference purposes. Not one of these people have harassed anyone to the best of my knowledge. They are people like myself that speak about GamerGate, and support its goals. What are those goals? To address the culture of corruption, cronyism, and nepotism that is rife throughout journalism, games journalism in particular. Ultimately, however, it will need to address the same flaws in journalism sum total, and the social justice narrative they've all been spewing over the last few years. Anita Sarkeesian brought it to the attention of gamers back in 2012, and the people that dealt with it chose to deal with her in the same way they deal with most idiots that decide that they are better than anyone else without first establishing merit within the community. They trolled her, and let her know their displeasure in no uncertain terms. Some of them went a bit overboard, and she used that to paint the narrative that everyone else had already fallen victim to. Gaming is full of misogynist assholes, and needed to be cleaned up in order to be more inclusive. The idea that video games cause sexism is worth less than the argument Jack Thompson made for violence, to the degree that when queried on Anita, he stated clearly that Anita herself was a bigger problem. That's not a good thing. Yes, he's a wealthy white lawyer, but he worked damned hard to make that money, and as a result, he's entitled to it. John McIntosh is a trust fund baby, living with dad on a private island, and spraying his bullshit to anyone that might hear him. I have a better example for the class, in a tweet written by Sophokise. To include as many people as possible you need to exclude those who don't believe in inclusion. The level of doublethink is astounding, and the mental gymnastics required to even write such a thing is the stuff epic legends are based on. What it amounts to is if you don't agree with our version of reality, you can't be included. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's Peter grade bollocks. Being inclusive means accepting people, not excluding them. The little mini-movement he and his friend started was nearly immediately co-opted by GamerGate, as by and large, we agree completely with the sentiment, if not your intent. You intended to shame us, and we have taken it up like a badge of honor. Why is that? Because we're more than happy to take anyone that plays games, and is willing to work and get better. The best are lionized, and the worst work at it a bit more. As a gamer, I'm not very good, but I have a big mouth and a willingness to use it to defend the hobby that's given me decades of unimpeded entertainment. If I want to play an older console game, then I can break out the console in question and get right on it. If I want a game I don't have, finding it might take a minute, but it's a long way from impossible. It even costs less than movies, or music, or what have you. The games I like most I can play for upwards of 100 hours, and I still paid at most $60. I might pay that for a game that runs 6 hours, or go see at most 2 movies with a date, or one with Kage and his clan, including transportation and snacks. Even so, I don't usually spend more than half that on a game when I can avoid it. There are cases where I want a game badly enough to pay original retail, and that's okay, too. I'm still going to come out of it entertained for far longer than, say, buying a Blu-ray of a movie I'm going to watch once and put on the shelf for a year. Games can tell better, more focused stories over a longer period of time, or they can simply be mindless fun. Games are a lot of things, including a sort of performance art, and you have to take the good with the bad, and critique both fairly. Take for example my review of Depression Quest. I didn't like it, but I didn't savage it because it was made by Zoe Quinn. I savaged it because it was crap. I made a note of Zoe, if only because of the sequence of events that led to it coming to my attention in the first place. Look, people, if you're going to build an argument, there are a few things you just don't do. First, don't over-generalize, especially if you don't know precisely what any given set includes. That is an incredibly fast way to hand it your ass. You spun a hate and bigotry narrative around a group that's so inclusive that even Christopher Hitchens would have been hard-pressed to come up with a workable argument of that nature. Next, don't cherry-pick your evidence. It's easily spotted and annoys pretty much everyone. Picking 10 tweets out of millions to support your case isn't honest. After that, mind your storm. Here's another that's easy to spot, and unless it's very well constructed, you might as well argue the points that were actually raised, rather than try and demoise the GamerGate people. We're long since used to being snickered at, bashed, and otherwise mangled for enjoying our hobby. Compared to some, you're rank amateurs. Next, don't beg the question. Also known as circular reasoning, it is the process by which your premises already contain the conclusion. Same goes for post hoc rationalizatios. If you could have predicted a horrible, sexist event based on a video game, then make your predictions, and we'll see if they bear out. Don't make assertions based on naught but your personal feels. Argue with the idea, not the person. I cannot stress this enough. The second you throw your toys out of the pram and start attacking people, you've lost. You're just done. Attacking me as a crazed, lonely, basement-dwelling eggbeard doesn't work. I don't have a beard, you see. How much of the rest of that is true I leave as an exercise for the easily amused. By the way, don't bother trying to track Kage down to get to me. We only really share a region, although I do go visit him a couple of times a week to deal with video things. I also have access to his Twitter and YouTube channels, and by extension his Google+. He can't be asked to look at Facebook, and has probably forgotten the password long since. Be careful about what words you throw around. You have some that were once rather powerful, and to some degree still are, but they are rapidly losing their effectiveness. Hate, misogyny, harassment, patriarchy and etc. all have meanings, very clear ones, and your incessant pushing of those terms in whatever configuratio you might mean that 10 seconds has diluted their power. Rape culture has been debunked thoroughly, although that one is still pushing buttons in some places. Most of the people I deal with are either rabid believers or have blown it off as garbage. Rape is not a joke, it is damaging. and when I approached the idea in the first of these videos, I had some information that wasn't entirely accurate. The prevalence of rape on college campuses seems to be roughly the same as it is for society at large, but it gets more attention because it is reported more frequently. Unfortunately, it also shows the other side of that particular issue, and that's false reports. Yes, you ladies can lie the same as the men, and in fact often do. Difference is, men usually do it most often to get out of trouble, and we do it to get attention. When men do it during attention seeking, it's usually pretty obvious, especially when they're drunk. When we lie, it's to get sympathy, so people will take care of us. You ladies, I want you to grow up and take responsibility for yourselves. If I can do it without being prompted and pushed into it, then you can take a little nudging and do the same. I chose to serve my community in one of the most dangerous ways that I can, and I have to deal with things on a regular basis that would curl your hair, your toenails, and stop your little raceseat hearts. I don't want to hear about getting PTSD from Twitter. You want to talk about PTSD? Try being a cop, a fireman, or an ambulance driver. Or better, join the military and volunteer to go to Afghanistan. Be the victim of a brutal crime, something. Then talk to me about PTSD. I'll be waiting. Or better, take that bullshit to Kage or Rockstar. They've both done time in combat conditions. Kage got out at the beginning of the millennium, and he still can't sit with his back to a door or window. Have you got it yet? I don't need your feminism, because I am loved and accepted by the people that actually matter to me. I am secure in who I am, and in my gender and sexuality. Gamers accept me for who I am and what I can do. It doesn't matter that I'm a white female, no more than it would if I were the queen of the Pleiades. Well, okay. If I could prove beyond a reasonable doubt that I was the queen of the Pleiades, that might be worth a couple of points. If I could kick ass in Unreal Tournament, StarCraft, or Quake 3 Arena, that would count for a lot more. If I was good in my tanking role at League of Legends, so much the better. Or as a healer in World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy XIV. I'm so-so at first-person shooters, as should be obvious from the length of time it took me to post reviews for BioShock Infinite and Alien Isolation. I'm much better at RPGs and adventure games. Once I get the hand of a platformer, I'm usually fine. I don't usually play fighting games, although I did make an exception for Persona 4 Arena and the Dead or Alive series. I consider Margareth a friend, and Mike Saravik is an ally, even if it was that his mind was changed only relatively recently. I admire Christina Hoff Sommers. I find lots of amusement in Mr. Fart, and Milo is adorable, especially when dealing with idiots. Rockstar gave a lot for the United States, and still makes solid games. Ralph is a source of news with some honesty in the biases. He's a blogger, and is unapologetic about it. But he makes for a nice pep talk when you people do stupid shit. Kage lost his family, and after a few misadventures, got his life back together. He just yesterday called a halt to all of the game projects he's been dreaming of making for years over this shit. He'd started writing this script, and I took it away from him so he could get himself back under control. He spent all day today in zombie mode. He didn't really hope for a lot of support already, but IGDA putting everyone through the ringer was more than he could take. He let everyone go, and told them that if they wanted to work in the industry, they needed to stay as far away from him as possible. Yet he's refusing to beg to be removed from the list. He'd just be added again. If the IGDA doesn't want to hear from him, they won't. Every person has a story, and no two are ever alike. Accept people for who they are, not for what you want them to be. Ask them what they want, and maybe, just maybe find that little bit of common ground with which to discuss. GamerGate can do that amongst themselves, but the antis only seem to have a hatred for GG to sustain them. It's not healthy. In fact, it's outright toxic, more so than any vicious or violent crime. That's where the justifications start. the demonizatio of entire groups. You come for them, one at a time, and insinuate yourselves and your rhetoric into their internal narrative, and when they are paralyzed by doubt and self-recrimination, you strike. You seize control, and then use them as your army to take the next group. This time, you started with the game's journalists, and tried to get in under the skin of the major publishers. When that didn't happen as quickly as you wanted, you co-opted the IGDA game scene, which was far easier. With those two things firmly in control, you attacked the gamers to get support from the major publishers, to very little effect. Then your little charade was exposed, and you lashed out at the gamers, producing more than a dozen articles inside of 24 hours, declaring us dead. Which leads us to what's going on right now. You've made another attempt to ruin people, and for some, you've no doubt succeeded. Let me be clear, your actions have been noted, and will not be tolerated. I feel free in speaking on behalf of GamerGate when I say that we will not go quietly unto the night. While we are still able to fight, we will. We have nothing to lose at this point. If we win, if we expose you for the entire world to see, then we get to keep evolving in whatever direction the market dictates. If we lose, then we as an identity, as a group will vanish, and we'll be right back where we were before. Playing our games in the quiet of our little spaces, maintaining servers for the multiplayer arena games we want to play, and quietly rebuilding anew. You can't kill us, you can only drive us back for a time. We are legion, and no matter how many times the industry gets hammered, we rebuild, better and stronger than before. In centuries past, feminism made some astonishing strides, and did a bit of good besides. We still didn't take on all the responsibilities that men are required to, but there was more good than bad. Today, the feminists of yesteryear would be ashamed, humiliated by what you're doing. They fought for equality, and in terms of opportunity, they received it. You and I and all the other women in the Western world did. In some cases, we did one better, as we have a large advantage over them in family court, and we're much more likely to get leniency in criminal cases. Even when we don't, we generally do a third of the time. If you want an example of that, look into the federal case that sent Kent and Joe Hovid to prison. He's been in nearly 10 years now, and she got out after 2 and another year of probation. I don't need your feminism, I don't want your allies. Treat me like a person, and get the same in return. I am an individual, not a faceless pair of breasts in the middle of a mob. I am not your shield, and I refuse to be your accomplice, knowing or not. Just to drive the point home, I'll wrap up with a few quotes from the social justice warriors currently attempting to mangle the gamers directly. Note, if you're supporting GamerGate, I truly believe you have damaged our community with your actions for years to come. Andreas Zecher, We Heart campaign page. GamerGate showed why everyone is welcome is not a message of inclusivity. So fake is on Twitter. Hint, if Sileraptor doesn't want to be labeled a creep, maybe he shouldn't follow creeps or attack women's credibility. Just a thought. Randy Harper, on Twitter. A quick note on this one, he wasn't attacking the credibility of women. He was attacking your credibility, Randy. If your Blockbot had looked at the timelines and been programmed to look for behavior patterns, then he wouldn't have been included. You just looked for a handful of names, and told Blockbot to block all the followers. If the combined follower list popped a name more than once, referring to the names lists as sheeple, monsters, idiots and stalkers in your code was a dead giveaway. Your credibility is zero. The GamerGate users using the We Heart avatars are deeply confused. It was a reaction to GG, saying your behavior was unacceptable plus gross. There are buts. On Twitter she then goes on to define a movement as a behavior. One last long comment from Randy on the @GamerGate side, this one from the comments on her GitHub. For the love of all that is holy, GamerGate is completely incapable of any kind of critical thought, and it appears I've got to hold their hands and wipe their asses. For fuck's sake, this is not creating a blacklist to keep people out of the industry. You unemployed eggbeard, if you could grow a beard, cockwaffles. It is creating a blocklist so normal people don't have to listen to your incoherent lullaby conspiracy theories peppered by whatever's on your political word of the day calendar. It's hilarious that you're pretending to be AIM characters on IRC/Reddit/8chan while somehow loathing women that kick ass and have AIM hairil. I really don't know how you consolidate that one in the barren pit of a wasteland you call a brain. But I'm sure Mr. Total Ballsack can help you with it. I hear he's got an IQ of 155. He's all class and ready to lead you lemmings off a cliff. More power to him. You are the army that no one wants but he deserves. You can't sue anyone from a list that's generated off Twitter's API. I wish you could. I really hope you try. Because it would make my *year* if I got served for the case Hot Dog Gamer Goblin v Randy Harper. Please. I am begging you. No. Elala. Anyone. Literally go fuck yourselves. Literally blue. Yes, that's word for word. This one's not an atty, but an uninvolved casual with a rather interesting remark. As a recent casual observer, it's clear that if certain #ID devs put effort into games and not GG drama, they'd finish games. Shannon Tweed, on Twitter. Now a bit from Margareth, who appeared on the seed list before being reluctantly removed, presumably by pressure from IGDA. Here's #GamerGate in an analogy. It's like beating a beehive in hopes that, eventually, the bees will get demoralized and give up. We don't hate you, we hate what you're doing. You're welcome to come play, as long as you leave your politics at the door. I would maintain my anonymity if you're one of the more public faces. You've set gaming back a few decades, and you'd catch some flack for that. I'd like to end this on a positive note, so perhaps a quote from Roberta Williams, the founder of Sierra, from a 2006 interview. No, I never experienced any problem with being a female in a so-called male-dominated field. They were happy to have me. It was just really up to me to actually put myself there. If more women want to be a part of the computer industry today, they just have to do more to put themselves out there. Nobody, in reality, is keeping them out in my opinion, anyway. What you choose to take away from that is up to you, but to me, those words are an inspiration. Roberta is a hero, a game designer from before the title became a fashion accessory. I would also look into her Ali, who has done the sort of work that real feminists do, in places that need it. None of this teacup crap. You want to make games? Let's make games. Let's play games. Let's let the good ones rise, and the crap sink to the bottom, learn from those, and then make more. Let's make games fun again.